Our name is Porte. We run a program where we provide one-on-one mentorship for high school students to help them launch their own impact projects. Grant, how about you just give us an introduction to yourself?
All right, my name is Grant Poole. I am from just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, so a small town called Woodstock. I've grown up here my whole life. I just graduated high school, so I'm going to be going to Yale in the fall, which I'm super excited for. I started a project around 2 years ago. It's called Pages of Hope, and it is rapidly growing. It's working on literacy and collecting materials like books or school supplies for students in need.
Who or what inspires you?
My grandpa is one of my biggest inspirations. So my grandparents actually they're my neighbors. So they live right down the street from me. He was a lawyer his whole life, but then just recently he started writing books. And so he has dedicated a couple books to me and they're sold internationally. And it's just like a huge inspiration for me because it shows me that, you can do things. It's never too late to start something.
Give us an overview of what Pages of Hope is and how it began.
It originally started as just a smaller book drive that I started just to give back to my community with, literacy materials, but it grew into a much larger project. So it is now a registered nonprofit, and we have collected around 13,000 books that we have donated here in Atlanta, but then also to around 4 countries now internationally. And then we've also started doing school supplies, and we donate them to students or schools or libraries that are in need of things like that. And so our goal is kind of just to work against, it's something called book deserts, which is kind of where students don't have books or the materials they need to learn properly. So we're working to increase literacy and improve education across the world. Initial spark for Pages of Hope comes from growing up in a house with my mom as a teacher. So she worked in Title I schools, which are some of the poorest schools here in Atlanta. And so she obviously has students who are struggling with their education or aren't getting the materials they need for their education. And so just growing up in that environment and hearing her stories about that was kind of the initial spark for that. And then also my grandma, she was also a teacher her whole life. And so hearing stories from them about education and about students who, desire that education, but don't quite have the materials to excel like they should be was kind of my spark. And just growing up in that community and environment and seeing that.
Why did you decide on a book drive to help with literacy and education as opposed to other forms of helping people with literacy and education?
When my mom worked in the Title I school that she worked at here in Atlanta, one of the things they would do is package lunch for students who didn't have lunch, but then they would also give them books because the students didn't have anything to continue their education beyond the school's walls. That kind of just got me started on researching like what kind of materials kids have. And so I found out that a low amount of households have more than, I think it was 10 books in their household. And so I think that kind of just inspired me as books are just an incredible way to continue education beyond the classroom walls.
Just yourself, and when you first started that organization, could you outline that entire journey and the main turning points that got to where it is today?
I really just wanted to start a book drive and see what happened from there, see how many people donated, see if we could get, a couple boxes of books. And from there, some other people pouring into me were saying, why don't you start some more book drives? You have all these connections, you have your pool where you swim at, and you have your neighborhood. Why don't you start a couple book drives there? From there, we just got a ton of, community support from people all over the place. Teachers at my school would reach out to me and be like, hey, I have this, closet full of books that I'm not going to be using this year. Would you like to come in and do your work with them? And we would be like, sure. And we would go in and take them. And so we've just started reaching out to other organizations now. And one of the original organizations we reached out to was called Books for Africa. And they've been a huge help to us as well. And they've actually helped us become international by bringing our books over to Kenya and Ethiopia. At the beginning, I never would have dreamed that so many people would be willing to pour into us and help us become what we are today.
Do you have a specific person you reached out to or organization that you reached out to about Pages of Hope that really you were like, wow, like that changed everything?
Definitely our Books for Africa partnership. And how I got to that was literally through a simple email. I was looking up, organizations that work with literacy in Atlanta, and I somehow stumbled upon them and thought, why not email them? Because they caught my eye. And so I did. I shot them an email and they promptly responded super positively, and they were able to partner with us and take our books. I drove down there around a week later, and I met with some of the leaders of the organization, and it was just an incredible experience. And it all just came from a simple email, from Googling something.
What would you say was the hardest part about running the initiative?
Well, one of the biggest challenges, I think, for anything that, you want to start, you want to do, is just getting started, because you're scared to take that first step, because, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if it's going to be worth it in the end. And so I would say definitely scary for me, because I felt like I was putting myself out there for criticism by starting this thing. I was even like hesitant to bring it up to my parents, because I was like, what are they going to think of, they're going to think, why do I want to start this book drive? That's very random. One of the biggest challenges for us has been just getting enough aid or like support to sort through all our books. And so we've been trying to pull people in. That's been one of our struggles, has been just the workload that comes with it and the time that it takes to, sort the children's books over here and the textbooks over here, and then figure out where we're going to go with those.
What would you say has been the biggest lesson you've learned about that topic by launching this initiative?
Things sometimes aren't what they appear to be on the outside. So, looking at a lot of these things, looking at so many times people or organizations put up kind of a front. I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is to dig deeper than the surface. That comes in education, looking deeper than, okay, these kids can read, but do they have the materials they need to excel? So many organizations or things like that kind of just play it off like, we're okay. But once you dig deeper than the surface, things sometimes aren't so great on the inside. And I think that's been a lesson for me with people in my life too. And, you ask someone how they're doing and they say, I'm doing good, I'm doing fine. But sometimes it takes a little bit of digging deeper than the surface to find out if something is really wrong with them, or if something is happening with them, and look a little deeper than what meets the eye.
What is advice you would give to a high school student who comes from a similar background to you?
I come from, a smaller town in a very, very small school with not a ton of opportunities it was a great school, don't get me wrong, but it just didn't have a ton of opportunities to get myself out there and join programs or organizations that I was passionate about. Go outside of what you're offered in your school or in your community and find things that are way beyond that. And so for me, it ended up being government programs that spanned like the whole nation. And I ended up being able to go to Washington, D.C. and stuff. But had I just kind of stuck with, my school doesn't really offer that stuff, I never would have been able to do that. And so don't be afraid to reach beyond your boundaries within, where you are right now.
Do you have specific program recommendations people can go check out?
Yes, I do. I'm a huge advocate of this one. It's called Boys and Girls State. So it's run by the American Legion, which is like the Veterans Organization of America. And they have it in every single state. It's an incredible leadership and like government program. So for kids looking to go into politics, government, civic service. From Boys and Girls State, they choose 2 boys and 2 girls to represent them at Boys and Girls Nation, which is how I got to go to Washington, D.C. It was an incredible experience. It's also run by the American Legion. So I definitely recommend those programs. I would also recommend the Governor's Honors Program, which is kind of like you go live on a college campus and you learn about something you're super interested in. You get to go and do all this super cool stuff with them. So just a couple programs I'd recommend.
What's something that made you crash out in high school?
The ACT, standardized testing. This is so unnecessary for students, but I became obsessed with like getting a good score on the standardized testing. I took it 5 different times.
Wow.
I would definitely crash out. I should not have taken it that many times. It was so unnecessary.
What's a topic you can geek out over for hours?
I'm definitely like a Harry Potter nerd. I think I've read all the books like 4 times. And I actually made my family go to London and go to like where they filmed all the movies because I was so obsessed with it.
Hot take?
I don't like spicy chips. I don't think they're good. Like Takis, I think everyone is so obsessed with Takis. I don't like Takis. I don't think they're very good. Same with hot Cheetos.
Any next passion projects you're thinking about?
Individual tutoring would be super cool to be able to start up here in the Atlanta area and working with students one-on-one. So that would be a really cool like additional passion project that I think would go along with Pages of Hope. A passion project I've wanted to start would be like writing music. So I play the violin, the viola, and so I've always wanted to, I took like music theory classes recently. And so I think it would be super interesting to like write a song or write a couple pieces for like a group to play. That would be a really cool, I think, passion projects that I could work on.
Underrated study tips and time management tips for high school students.
Set a limit for yourself. So I think this worked for me really well in not doing it would be, I would just be like, tonight I am going to bed at 12, and I would just set that limit for myself, and I would study up until 12. And even if I didn't get everything I wanted to study or look at, I would just finish at 12. And I think you know more than you think you do. And so a lot of times we just overdo it and overstress ourselves, and we would have been better off going to bed with the information you knew.